Hello and welcome to Newsclick. Today we have with us Professor Aijaz Ahmad, political commentator and who has been with Newsclick discussing various issues for quite some time. Aijaz, good to have you with us.
Very good to be back.
Looking at Obama's new statement announcing his strategy of IS, do you find any evidence of new strategic thinking on the US part, or is it essentially the same old policy of aligning with what would be called the pro-Sunni extremist alliance of Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Gulf monarchies on one side, and then the US, against now what is called the IS, but also involving bombing of Syria?
Well, I'm actually greatly impressed by the consistency of American strategy. And that is why you don't find anything new in this speech.
And you're not being sarcastic.
Well, no, not sarcastic, no. There might be some humor in it, but not sarcastic. No, I mean it, exactly. That since actually the Clinton period, but certainly once Bush came in, the neoconservative definition of what American strategic interests were in the world, but focused very much on the Middle East, and how to achieve them and how long it will take, was bought by the largest section of the strategic community in the United States, and they have followed that since then. And with that is a sense in the United States, and that has been going on, I think, since Afghanistan, that all of these things have a cost. They will have unforeseen consequences, but we have the power to deal with those unforeseen consequences. This whole thing would involve immense amount of violence and killings and all that. But that is what you require if you're going to change the very structure of history. That is the larger strategic design. Central to it has been, from the beginning, remaking of Iraq and remaking of Syria, what they call rollback of Syria. In 2007, Condoleezza Rice said, we need a Sunni arc to deal with the Shia arc, which then means exactly the people who have just met
In Jeddah.
who are the allies.
In Jeddah, the recent meeting in Jeddah.
The recent meeting in Jeddah, in which the main players are Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Jordan, Turkey, and now, after Sisi, Egypt, supervised by the United States, and behind the scenes, Israel. This is the coalition. And the breakup of Syria, destruction of the Assad government, is integral to it. So what appears to be a contradiction in American policy, that on the one hand you want to fight IS, but the Assad government is really the only credible local force which can fight IS, so why don't you align with Assad and so on? They're secular, these are religious and so on. It's only at the surface, in my view.
So essentially it means continuation of the policies in Syria, with the added proviso now that they are going to add aerial bombardment without the sanction of the Syrian government. Would not that be a problem in terms of international law, and the fact that Russians have already protested on this?
International law has not been a problem for the United States for a long time, and they have said so. They have said that the kind of warfare you now have, in that Geneva Conventions don't apply. The very structure of the United Nations and the security conceptions on which it was based do not apply. Even the Westphalian notion of sovereignty of nation states do not apply. Americans have said it again and again. So again, it is people who believe in international law who quite rightly point out that this is completely in violation of all international law. But the Americans don't worry about that. But yes, it is against international law, and the Soviets have been the most vociferous in saying so. Predictably Iran, predictably Syria itself.
Do you think that this is credible in the short run or medium run, that you can fight IS in Iraq and fight against the Syrian regime simultaneously with supposedly fighting the IS in Syria? Do you think that actually this remaking, what is clearly the agenda for the US and has been so for quite some time, do you think it's actually going to succeed, or is it going to leave essentially a disaster in terms of battles, continuing battles, contending forces, and a destruction on the ground and little else?
Well, I mean, that is what happened in Iraq, over the last decade. Americans don't seem to be terribly unhappy about what happened. And for that also they have a solution, which is now soft partition, hard partition, whatever. Peshmergas are the ones, they are really truly backing this new regime, sort of so-called change in the Shia regime. And they're not too excited about it. They say it is a better situation than it was. So that trifurcation of Iraq, they're perfectly happy about it. Yes, costs would be of that magnitude in Syria. Costs have been of that magnitude in Afghanistan. Every country that they have gone into, they have created precisely this situation. But that's what they believe they need to do, and that it will take them 30 years to remake the region. So yes, it appears to be incompatible. It is, in some senses, in my view, it is incompatible, which is why it will lead to so much violence.
You know, there is a map circulating, which is, I think, was published in 2006 by a US Lieutenant Colonel of the Army, was very high up in their intelligence setup, which shows all this in a map form. Do you think this is what is really underlying the US policy, if you have seen them?
Yes, I've seen that map. It corresponds fairly closely to the sort of thing that the US is pursuing there. I think breaking up countries and turning them into ethnic enclaves, which have also broken themselves, and therefore tremendous amount of violent competition among them, and not having really a strong, powerful states in this whole region is part of what Americans want.
Is the objective.
Is the objective.
You know, it's interesting. Both Syria and Iraq don't have this history. In fact, before the Iraq invasion by the United States, 40% of the families in Iraq had intermarried with each other, Shias and Sunnis.
Absolutely.
So there was absolutely this kind of division didn't exist.
It's pure fiction.
And Syria, this division has not existed for hundreds of years.
And this Assad regime, all these people, these Baathists on both sides, whatever else they may have been, but they were devoutly secular. I mean, the Alawi, the so-called Alawi regime, as a matter of fact, the majority of the regime is Sunni in Syria. This is a fiction that it's an Alawi regime.
Hafiz al-Assad had married into the Sunni
Absolutely.
trading family.
Absolutely. So this is not how it works. Alawis are a small community, and very often what happens in these communities is that the military, and they were a poor peasant community by and large. So yes, absolutely. These are things that have been created. Now, if you create this, and if you break a society, what do people then have to fall back upon? Family, clan, religious community, this, that, and the other. And I mean, in Iraq, we know for a fact how many of these militias were actually created by the Americans. In Syria, latest seems to be that the so-called Free Syrian Army is a complete fiction. There are about 14 to 18 commanders on the ground who are being supplied and overseen directly by the CIA. Now, directly cannot be entirely directly. It means Saudi and Jordanian intelligence services, which means that you've got a situation that you had with the Mujahideen in Iraq. It's a CIA show with several militias run through ISI.
And Turkey.
Here, absolutely, Turkey. Yeah. Now, this is so crazy. Originally, you would think it is said that Qatar is behind the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, Qatar is also said to have given at least $2 billion, possibly up to $6 billion to all of these militias. They are not Muslim Brotherhood. Originally, in the first 1 year, the Muslim Brotherhood were very prominent, but since then they have been edged out. But Qatar has not withdrawn
its funding.
Its funding. Now the Muslim Brotherhood is going to leave Qatar and relocate itself to Turkey. Turkey is said to be entirely behind the Muslim Brotherhood, but all of these militias have been supported and funded and weaponized by them.
So, in a larger picture of this would be that United States really finds Arab nationalism its enemy, and the destruction of the Arab nation states which came up post-colonial period, that has been the fundamental aim, and which is what's happening now.
Certainly that, but I think we have to go one step further. They don't want any state in this region which would be strong enough even to oppose American designs for the management of oil in the area. They just don't want a strong state, even if it is pro-American, even if it is Islamist, not Arab nationalist, pan-Islamist, whatever. They want to break up these states and have just clients, or reduce them to the level of clients and impose upon them what is the relationship with Israel and the management of oil, the American way.
Thank you, Aijaz. Let's continue to see what happens in this region. The way you're describing and the way it's panning out, it's clear it's going to continue in this form for quite some time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome.